Yo, this is Bear, and today we're going to be in my new segment, Baron's Bookshelf, and we're going to be discussing the book As a Man Thinketh by James Allen. Alright, so today we're going to be talking about As a Man Thinketh. It was written by James Allen in 1902. He was born in 1864 during the New Thought movement in the UK. He was born in Leicester, I believe. And really the New Thought movement was about positive thinking, that everything, there's an internal locus of control. You can control your destiny, per se. And he also, interestingly enough, he actually didn't have that good of a childhood. He's one of 10 kids. His dad died of mysterious causes in New York at the age of 15. He worked a factory job at age 15, but granted, a lot of those people, a lot of the kids at the time were working at 12 unless they had some sort of person to pay for their education. But he was known to actually read during his breaks at his factory job, Shakespeare and stuff, and that's kind of how he started garnering his intelligence. I'm going to end this little forward biography by giving a quote from his wife about him. He never wrote theories or for the sake of writing, but he wrote when he had a message, and it became a message only when he had lived it on his own life and knew that was good. So what does that mean? Really, I take that as he wasn't someone who just put out stuff to get money. He wasn't someone that just talked out of his butt, right? He was a person, he was an actual practitioner, and he made sure what he's a practitioner of was good, is working, and was positive. And I think that's something that lacks on the self-help industry in general these days. But anyway, let's crack into the book now. So the first section is called Effective Thought on Circumstances. And just to preface all of this, one of my favorite quotes from him, I think this is a big subject of the book, is they themselves are makers of themselves. Again, this means that you're basically a controller of your destiny. You can actually shape your circumstances. You're not necessarily that little leaf blowing in the wind. You're not necessarily that little leaf blowing in the wind. You actually can shape your circumstances. And this is kind of the early proponent of the whole entire self-help movement in a nutshell, because everything's about having that internal locus of control. Anyway, to crack into it, this point will get repeated over and over again, but to crack into it, James Allen was actually a gardener on the side, and he uses a lot of gardening references to in his work. So the first quote is, "Man's mind may be likened to a garden which may be intelligently cultivated or allowed to run wild, but whether cultivated or neglected, it must and will bring forth." So what does that mean? It's pretty literal translation. He's basically saying your mind is a garden. What happens to a garden if you let's say you put the best plants in, you wait for a month, and then you let go. It gets weeds again. It's not going to be that great of a garden. And that's what he says for your mind. You need to keep working on it. You need to make sure you're putting in these positive influences, these positive thoughts into it. And he goes on to say, "Let a man radically alter his thoughts, and he will be astonished at the rapid transformation it will affect in the material conditions of his life. Men imagine that thought can be secret, but it cannot. It rapidly crystallizes into habit, and habit solidifies into circumstance." Now this is a very important part of this whole entire book. Thought turns into habit, which turns into circumstance. Remember that formula. The next point, he gives an example. He says selfish thoughts might lead into habits of self-seeking, and which kind of ends in distressing circumstances. And it's not that hard to verify what that means, because you look at a person, let's just say a person that needs that external fulfillment, per se. If there's always going to be that one person that doesn't give it, and when they don't get that, it's going to be a very distressing time. They're not really filling themselves from within, right? Anyway, the next point he makes is, with this whole entire circumstance, is that if you want that better circumstance, if you want the high achievement, you also have to sacrifice. Sacrifice is in complete ratio with how much achievement you have. If you have a lot of it, you're going to go far. If you don't have a lot, you're not going to achieve that much. And I love this quote. He says, "You will become as small as your controlling desire, as great as your dominant aspiration. So really, how unwavering are you on your purpose? Are you willing to let fear or a little doubt or anything like that, like just sneak in and like mess with your purpose? Or are you just super focused, super calm, super serene on it? The next point he makes is that good thoughts and actions always brings back good results. He basically likens it to gardening, where if you plant corn, you're going to get corn. You're not getting anything else. And I really think this is true. You can think really hard about it and think about circumstances in your life. Even with bad stuff, if you have good thought, you're going to take good stuff out of it. Like, you're going to take a learning lesson out of a mistake. Even if the mistake's like quote unquote bad, you're going to take something out of it, right? And you might also think, well, what about suffering? I didn't necessarily do anything. I got the suffering, or maybe I put a lot of positiveness, but I'm getting the suffering. He says, suffering is always the effect of wrong thought in some direction. It is an indication that the individual is out of harmony within himself, with the law of his being. The soul and the supreme use of suffering is to purify, to burn out all that is useless and impure. So really, it's saying that suffering is almost like a path to the answer, right? And if I think of like my own circumstances, would just say I'm actually sharing a car right now, and that removes a lot of independence per se, but it's also kind of suffering in a positive way, because it shows me, hey, work harder, you're going to get this, like put in the work. It's show me the path, like the obstacle is away, as Ryan Holiday might say. But this is another favorite quote of mine from the text. He says, "Indigence and indulgence are the two extremes of wretchedness. They are both equally unnatural and the result of mental disorder." Now, it's a very vicious and savage way of saying it, but I think it's really true. I think it's talking about human temperament on a prosperous being really isn't this indigence. And indigence means neediness. And indulgence means like gluttony, like over-consuming for pleasure. And really, that is a side effect of impure thought if you think about it. Like, when is neediness good? When is indulgence good? And James Allen goes on to say what type of the prosperous man's going to be happy. He's not going to necessarily need any of that to fulfill himself. He's going to be filled from within. And the next quote, you hear this a lot. This quote's been stolen a lot. He says, "Men do not attract that which they want, but that which they are." So you could take this a literal abstract. This applies to all levels of life, men or women. A funny example, how about you look at some of your friends, guys or girls, right? Now look who they are. Think about all the ones that have been in a relationship for a while. Then think about them and how they relate. Are they close? Are they far apart? Most likely, they're close. So it really goes to show you that people kind of end up. The guy may want the supermodel, and the girl may want the athlete or whomever, but really you're gonna end up with what you actually deserve, not what you want. And he goes to say that like whims, fancies, ambitions, it doesn't matter. Really, you're just gonna get what you deserve, not what you want in that aspect. And he makes a great quote that basically men are anxious to improve their circumstance, but are unwilling to move themselves and therefore remain bound. So what does that really mean? People want to get certain things, but they're really not willing. They're really not willing to put in the work on it. Like just a silly example, right? Well, would just say you have a guy and maybe he'd want to be with better girls or something. Well, he might want that, but what if I just say, "Oh, go talk to that girl"? He's gonna freeze up. Like 99% of sober guys are gonna like that. They're not gonna be able to do that. They want it. They're not willing to change their mind, and they're not willing to go through that to improve it. So the next section is called Effective Thought on Health and the Body. And there's really only 3 points to be made here. And we've already kind of discussed how thought turns into habit, turns into circumstance. Very important. And you might still be thinking that thought's a little abstract. Like, okay, it turns a habit, but habits are almost abstract too. No, not at all. Thoughts actually still affect your body. Like, he says here that poor thoughts result in disease and decay, while beautiful thoughts lead to youthfulness and beauty. And that's a very poetic way of saying it. But you could take this on a literal or abstract level. Let's say on a literal level. look at a president from before he's in office till after he's in office. All that stress he receives, all those stressful thoughts he's going to have during his time in, really age him. You can't see a president that does not look a lot more aged per se. And it goes to show you like the effect of thought on your circumstance. And also too, you could take it another way. Speaking about diets, let's say your friend goes on a diet. They've been eating horrible all their life and they're just like, I'm going to go on a diet. What's going to happen? High percent chance they're going to fail, fall on their face. And why is that? Because they're really only fixing an effect. They're not fixing the cause. They're trying to stop wanting the food without figuring out what really causes them that desire to have that food. So what he says is, if you purify your thoughts, you're not going to want that impure food. Simple as that. And it's really ingenious in my opinion. It's definitely a different paradigm to look at things and how social conditioning teaches you. And I'm going to leave you off with the last quote from the section is, Goth Beer has been known to kill men as speedily as a bullet. And they are continually killing thousands of people just as surely, though less rapidly. So again, you could take this literal, abstract. What does it really mean? It means that it's killed dreams. Fear has done a lot of things. And I'll let you guys discuss that in the comments. Tell me how you interpret that. But the next section is thought and purpose. This is a very important section in the book. It basically talks about, he says that your purpose should be your centralizing filter for your thought. You should be thinking there. You shouldn't be thinking about your purpose. You should be thinking through it. So you should ignore all those wavering thoughts of longings, of yearnings, of all that. You should be thinking straight ahead, your purpose. And he says if you could do this, you're on the royal road of self-control and you have true concentration. Now what does he mean with true concentration? Well, he's really talking about presence. He's talking about that ability to just be able to do what you want to do with all those little distracting thoughts coming in, or those bad habits per se. Here's a good quote. Thought allied fearlessly to purpose becomes creative force. He who knows this is ready to become something higher and stronger than a mere bundle of wavering thoughts and fluctuating sensations. He who does this has become the conscious and intelligent wielder of his mental powers. Now really what it's saying is, if you have the ability to push past, ignore, not let those into reality, those little petty things, those little fluctuations, those little desires of fear and doubt, it's saying that you're a creative force, you're going to achieve what you're going to achieve, straight up. And you might also be thinking about failure. You're like, well, I'm following my purpose, I'm getting failure. I thought I was going to get achievement. Some things to know about that he mentions in the book. Number one, failure is necessary for attainment of something. If you want to become an expert at something, if you want to become great at something, you're going to fail. You're going to fail a lot, okay? So it's really important to know it's just part of the path. You have to accept it, embrace it, right? Another thing too, he says if used the right way, it can serve whoever it is. Like, so you could, again, it's kind of making an upward spiral. Everything that's either against you or going for you, you're just making it going up for you anyway. And you might be thinking, well, how did I necessarily make a failure work for me? Well, there's 1,000 ways at the end of the day that it can work for you. But one of the examples he gives is that it's easy to overcome weakness. You're probably still weak if you can't like accept failure. So it's just part of the learning steps, really. And one of the last quotes is, aimlessness is a vice. And again, this is talking about purpose. You have to be thinking through that purpose. If you have a weak purpose, you're gonna let in little petty thoughts, little self-pitying doubts, everything. And well, let's think about that for a second. Like, let's say I'm trying to start this like little $1 million business, right? Now, if I really want to start, if I want to have a strong purpose on that $1 million business, I'm not going to let little petty thoughts come in. So like maybe, let's say I get coffee, and it's not that good, it's not horrible, but I'm like, meh, I wish I had another. This wasn't that good, why did I just pay $2 or $3 for it? And the thing is, the person with the petty concerns is going to go and do that. They're going to go and fix that. And the person with a more stronger circle of concerns is going to be focused on just working on a business, what's the next step towards that? What are they necessarily going to be doing? That leads into the next section, the thought factor and achievements. Now, there's 2 points to be made out of that. And the first point is that at any point you could really, like, quote unquote, fall from grace. Like, you may make it, but you could still fall back. Like, let's say you make the world's best garden, if we go back to that metaphor from earlier, and you just let it go for a month, what's going to happen? It's going to be full of weeds again. So that's going to be the same thing with success. Let's say you make it to the top, but if you just start getting comfortable, if you view getting to the top as being a comfort spot, you're viewing it all wrong. You always have to be striving towards that purpose, whether it's discomfort or comfort. You always have to be. And so that means don't lose your edge. And the next thing he says is that for a strong man to help a weaker man, the weaker man has to be willing to learn. It's just time-saving advice that you really shouldn't try to help those that aren't willing for it yet. And also too, it goes later on to say that even if they are willing to, the changes have to happen within the person, within the weaker person. A stronger person cannot change their thoughts, cannot change their effort put in. They are purely just helping they're just helping accelerate their process, but they're not really causing the internal changes, that journey that's needed. And one of the next sections is called Visions and Ideals. Now, visions does not mean idle wishes. That's not what this is at all. Visions is what you actually see yourself. Again, thoughts turn into habits, habits turn into circumstances. What does that mean? That means that your vision, something you see, something you actually believe in, is gonna manifest with time. Now, this isn't, I wish I had a sports car. It's like, no, I actually see myself with it. It's happening. I'm working towards it. And one of the points is you might see yourself, you might be in a bad position and you're like, oh, how can I vision that? How can I vision that I'm going to be in a certain place? And he offers kind of an interesting quote. He says, your circumstances may be uncongenial, but they shall not long remain. So if but perceive an ideal and strive to reach it, you cannot travel within and stand still without. The next point he makes is that really, you look at the Thoughtless, you look at the Indulgent. Indulgent just means lazy. You look at any of that stuff, and those people, they're usually going to be looking at the end effect. They're not going to be looking at the path or what started it. They're going to be very focused on that. James Allen puts it that they're just going to say it's up to chance, or maybe they're just favored, or they're just in a good position, right? They weren't necessarily, they didn't do the hard work, and really they're ignoring all the trials, the tribulations, tryings of the soul, right? All the failures, the ups and downs, they're ignoring that, because that means that if they accept that, then they can't have their rationalization why they haven't made it anywhere. They just can't. So that's a good, interesting thing to know, and that's a decent sized group mentality in the United States that you have to watch out for a little bit. And the last section is serenity. Now, what does he mean with this? He's talking about calmness, serenity. As Eckhart Tolle may say in The Power Now, presence. Great book, read it by the way. Basically he says that you need presence to really follow your purpose. You can't have all those distracting thoughts. You have to be able to focus solely on that. So, and also that keeps you away from petty thoughts. That keeps you away from that kind of like lower consciousness thinking. And he says that being able to be so grounded, to be like almost like the tree at the deep roots within yourself, people are going to gravitate towards that. People want to work with that. It's just a naturally more attractive trait. Because he describes it, he likens it to a tree on a sunny day, providing all this shade to all the people in the hot, hot weather. And later he goes on to say something really poignant. How insignificant mere money-seeking looks in comparison with a serene life, a life that swells in the ocean of truth, beneath the waves, beyond the reach of tempests, in the eternal calm. Now what he's saying is, really, you might be searching for money, but what does that mean if you're not calm? What does that mean if you're not happy? Like seriously, what does that mean? So it's just a really nice thing to just have that in general. Now to recap, write this down, this is important. There is basically 3 parts. Remember, number 1, they themselves are makers of themselves. This is a proponent of all self-help basically. Number 2, Thought turns into habit. Habit turns into circumstance. Very important, very important. And the last thing is, so you have a strong, strong purpose. So you're thinking through it, you're not thinking through your little base desires, is to have the calmness, to meditate. James Allen was known to meditate an hour a day, actually. Really, if you have all three of those things, those are the main tenets of the book. They're just very important, very practical towards life and pursuing what you want to pursue. Now I'm going to leave you with a final quote here from the book. Think strongly, attempt fearlessly, and accomplish masterfully. So that's the end of this book discussion. And make sure to tune in next week. I'll be putting out a video each week that will be coming out on Sundays. I'm going to be starting a new segment with my new 30-day challenge. I'm actually going to be analyzing this book. I'm going to be going through trying to figure out exactly what he's trying to say, what he's trying to propose that we should actually be being and living. Not just, the thing is, reading a book, yeah, it's nice intellectual knowledge, but intellectual knowledge means nothing if it's never used. So, and make sure too, I want to build a community here at the channel. Like, I want you guys to comment, I want you guys to discuss about points you want to incorporate in your life. I want you, maybe you have empirical evidence against something, I want you to debate it. I'll be reading all the comments, I'll be going through. Leave a like or a dislike if you genuinely enjoyed it, or if you didn't enjoy it. Make sure to subscribe. New videos each Sunday, and I'll see you then. Baron, signing off.